You're embarrassing me, Dad. Stop being so needy and get your own ride. My son's cruel words echoed through the hospital corridor where he worked as Chicago's top neurosurgeon. I was still recovering from open-heart surgery, barely able to walk without assistance, yet my own child refused to drive me home. Little did he know that his worthless handyman father owned the very building he practiced in, along with half of Chicago's real estate. By tomorrow, he'd discovered the truth. But by then, it would be too late. Before continuing the story, please comment below to let me know where you are hearing this story from. If this happened to you, how would you react? Share below. 3 days after open-heart surgery, at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the same hospital where Dr. Michael Carter worked as a renowned neurosurgeon. My own son talking to me like I was some burden he couldn't wait to discard. Dad, seriously? I'm not your personal chauffeur. Take an Uber like everyone else. Some of us have real careers to worry about. Stop being so needy and pathetic. Another message appeared. And don't embarrass me by showing up at the hospital looking like a homeless person. My colleagues already think less of me because of your background. My background. 22 years old, I'd bought my first rundown duplex with borrowed money. Michael was 5 then, handing me tools while I fixed broken pipes and painted walls. Daddy, are we building something big? He'd asked. Yes, son, I'd whispered. Something very big. Carter Properties grew from that single duplex into an empire. 300 properties across the Midwest. Shopping centers, office buildings, apartment complexes. When I sold the company in 2015 for $1.8 billion, I was one of the wealthiest men in Chicago. But Michael didn't know that. Nobody did. I'd moved to Nebraska, drove an old pickup truck, lived modestly. I wanted to see if my son would love me for who I was, not what I owned. 8 years of watching him grow more embarrassed, more condescending. My father used to do some construction, he'd tell people, the shame dripping from his voice. My phone buzzed again. Honestly, Dad, sometimes I wish you'd just stayed in that little Nebraska town and stopped bothering me. You're an embarrassment to the Carter name. The Carter name. The irony was devastating. He had no idea that the Carter name was worth nearly $2 billion. That he worked in a building I could buy with pocket change. That his embarrassing handyman father owned more real estate than most corporations. I scrolled through my contacts and found James Morrison, my former CFO at Carter Properties. Sam? How did the surgery go? The surgery went fine, James. But I need a favor. Something cold and final settled in my chest. I need you to pick me up from Northwestern Memorial. And James, bring the Phantom. The Rolls Royce? Sam, are you ending the charade? I looked at Michael's cruel messages, at the contempt my own son felt for the man who'd sacrificed everything for him. My son thinks I'm an embarrassment, James. He wishes I'd disappear. Well, he's about to discover exactly who his pathetic father really is. And then he'll learn that actions have consequences, and some mistakes can never be forgiven. 45 minutes later, I watched through my hospital window as a gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided into the circular drive like a predator stalking prey. The car cost more than most people's houses, its hand-polished surface reflecting the Chicago skyline like a mirror. James Morrison stepped out, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Michael's monthly salary. At 68, my former CFO had aged like fine wine, his silver hair perfectly styled, his bearing radiating the quiet confidence that came with managing billions of dollars. Sam, he said warmly as he entered my room, you look better than I expected. Heart surgery at our age is no joke. The doctors say I'll outlive them all, I replied, accepting his firm handshake. James, I need to ask you something. Do you ever regret selling Carter Properties? His eyes sharpened with interest. Regret making us both billionaires? Hardly, though I do miss the thrill of the hunt. Remember when we bought that entire downtown block for $30 million and turned it into the Millennium Shopping Complex? Worth $300 million now, I nodded. We had vision when others saw only decay. We built an empire, Sam, from that first duplex to owning half of Chicago's commercial real estate. James sat down, his expression growing serious. But you've been playing the humble retiree for 8 years. What changed? I showed him Michael's messages. James read them in silence, his jaw tightening with each cruel word. Your own son wrote this? His voice carried disbelief and disgust. Sam, this is This is unconscionable. He's ashamed of his construction worker father. Wishes I'd disappear so I wouldn't embarrass his precious reputation. The words tasted bitter. He has no idea that his embarrassing father built the Carter Properties empire from nothing. No idea that when we sold to Meridian Real Estate Group, I personally netted $1.8 billion. James was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? I'm done hiding, James. Done pretending to be less than I am to spare his feelings. I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in years. My son wants to be embarrassed by his father? Fine. But he's about to learn that the man he's been ashamed of is actually one of the most successful real estate moguls in the Chicago area. And when he realizes the truth, by then, it'll be too late for apologies. I gathered my discharge papers, my decision crystallizing like steel. James, I want you to set up a meeting with our attorneys. It's time to establish the Carter Foundation. A foundation? Sam, you're not thinking of... I'm thinking of giving away every penny to people who actually deserve it. Homeless shelters, affordable housing projects, programs that help people build real lives instead of fake reputations. James smiled slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. And your son? My son will inherit exactly what he thinks his father is worth. Nothing. As we walked toward the elevator, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For 8 years, I'd diminished myself, hoping Michael would love the man instead of the money. Instead, he'd grown to despise both the man and what he thought was my failure. Ready to remind Chicago who Samuel Carter really is? James asked as we approached the Phantom. More than ready. It's time Michael learned that his pathetic father owns more real estate than he could imagine in his wildest dreams. The hospital elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped into the marble lobby of Northwestern Memorial Hospital feeling like a different man than the one who'd been wheeled in 3 days ago. James walked beside me, his presence commanding immediate respect from the staff who recognized wealth and power when they saw it. The car is just outside, James murmured as we approached the main entrance. Are you ready for this, Sam? I nodded, straightening my shoulders. I've been ready for 8 years. The automatic doors slid open, and there it was. The Rolls-Royce Phantom sat in the circular drive like a sleeping giant, its obsidian paint reflecting the late afternoon sun. The chauffeur, impeccably dressed in a tailored uniform, stood at attention beside the rear door. Mr. Carter, he said with a respectful nod, opening the door with practiced precision. Welcome back, sir. I paused for just a moment, savoring the weight of those words. Mr. Carter, not hey old man or the handyman. The respect I'd earned through decades of hard work and brilliant business decisions. As I settled into the hand-stitched leather seats, I caught a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision. A figure near the hospital entrance, frozen in place. Someone watching. James, I said quietly. Isn't that Michael, by the main doors? James glanced through the tinted window and smiled grimly. Indeed it is, perfect timing. Dr. Michael Carter had been heading to his BMW, golf clubs in hand, when the Rolls-Royce caught his attention. He'd stopped to admire the magnificent machine, wondering which pharmaceutical executive or tech mogul was visiting the hospital. Then he saw the elderly man approaching the car, moving slowly but with unmistakable dignity. The chauffeur treating him like royalty, opening the door with ceremony reserved for the ultra-wealthy. Michael's golf clubs clattered to the pavement as recognition hit him like a lightning bolt. The man climbing into the $400,000 Rolls-Royce was his father. His pathetic, embarrassing construction worker father. That's impossible, Michael whispered, his hands trembling as he stared at the surreal scene. His father lived in a modest house in Nebraska. His father drove a beat-up pickup truck. His father was nobody. But there he was, settling into luxury like he'd been born to it. Michael's phone appeared in his shaking hands. Something was terribly wrong with this picture. He typed frantically, Samuel Carter, Nebraska. Nothing unusual appeared. Then, almost without thinking, he added Chicago to the search. The results loaded, and Michael's world exploded. Forbes. The reclusive real estate mogul returns. Chicago Tribune. Carter Properties. Founder worth $1.8 billion. Business Weekly. Samuel Carter, the man who built Chicago. Article after article, photo after photo. His father in boardrooms, his father at groundbreaking ceremonies, his father shaking hands with mayors and governors. The man Michael had spent years being ashamed of was one of the wealthiest, most successful businessmen in Chicago history. Michael's legs buckled. He sank onto a nearby bench, staring at his phone in horror. The building where he worked, Northwestern Memorial Hospital, was listed among Carter Properties' former holdings. His father had owned the very place where Michael practiced medicine. The man he'd called pathetic that morning owned more real estate than Michael could comprehend. His phone buzzed, a message from his father. "You had your chance, Michael. You chose to waste it." Michael looked up to see the Rolls-Royce's tinted window rolled down slightly. His father was watching him, and even from this distance, Michael could see something in those eyes he'd never seen before. Cold finality, and a disappointment so deep it was terrifying. As the Phantom glided away into Chicago traffic, Michael realized with growing dread that his cruel messages that morning had done more than hurt his father's feelings. They had sealed his own fate. Michael's hands shook as he dialed his father's number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, then went straight to voicemail. His father's calm voice filled his ear. "You've reached Samuel Carter. Leave a message." "Dad, please, I need to talk to you. I just found out about everything. I'm so sorry. Please call me back." He hung up and immediately called again, straight to voicemail. "Dad, it's Michael again. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But please, just give me 5 minutes to explain. I never knew about Carter Properties. I never knew you were. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so incredibly sorry." For the next hour, Michael called 17 times. Each call went directly to voicemail, each message more desperate than the last. "Dad, I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. You're not pathetic. You're incredible. You built an empire, and I was too stupid and arrogant to see it. Please, Dad, I know I hurt you. I know my words were cruel and unforgivable, but I'm your son. Doesn't that count for something? I'm begging you. Just one conversation. Let me apologize properly. Let me make this right." Finally, Michael switched to text messages, typing frantically through tears he didn't even realize were falling. "Dad, I'm sitting in the hospital parking lot crying like a child because I just realized I've been the worst son in history. You sacrificed everything for me, put me through medical school, supported my dreams, and I repaid you with contempt and shame. I called you pathetic this morning. You, a man worth $1.8 billion who chose to live humbly just to see if I would love you for who you are instead of what you own. I failed that test, didn't I? I failed it spectacularly. Please don't give up on me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. I'm your son, and I love you, and I'm sorry." An hour passed. Then 2. Michael's phone remained silent. Finally, at 8:30 p.m., a response arrived. Michael's heart leaped as he opened it, desperate for any sign of hope. "Michael, you're right about one thing. You failed the test. For 8 years I lived modestly, drove an old truck, and let you believe I was just a simple handyman. I wanted to see if my son would love me without the money, without the prestige, without the empire. Instead, you grew more ashamed of me each year. You called me an embarrassment to the Carter name. The irony is that the Carter name is worth more than you'll ever comprehend, but you'll never inherit a penny of it. Some mistakes can't be undone, son. Some words can't be taken back. You made your choice this morning when you called me pathetic and needy. Now I'm making mine. Don't contact me again." Michael stared at the message, reading it over and over, until the words blurred through his tears. His father wasn't just angry. He was done, finished. The finality in those words was absolute. He tried calling one more time. The phone didn't even ring. His number had been blocked. Michael sat in his BMW in the hospital parking lot, surrounded by the wreckage of his relationship with the only family he had left. His father, the billionaire real estate mogul he'd spent years being ashamed of, had just disowned him, and Michael knew with crushing certainty that he deserved every word of it. 2 weeks later, I sat in the cardiac follow-up clinic at Northwestern Memorial, waiting for my post-surgery checkup. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was back in the same building where my son worked, the same building I'd once owned through Carter Properties. "Mr. Carter?" A warm voice called my name. I looked up to see a woman in her early 60s, silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, wearing a white coat that couldn't hide her graceful bearing. Her name tag read Dr. Margaret Thompson, Cardiology. Something about her seemed familiar. "I'm Dr. Thompson. I'll be handling your follow-up today." She smiled, and suddenly I was 22 years old again, sitting in a MIT lecture hall. "Maggie?" I said softly. Maggie Sullivan from Professor Henderson's engineering physics class? Her eyes widened with recognition and delight. Samuel Carter! My goodness, it's been, 47 years? She sat down across from me, her professional demeanor softening into genuine warmth. I heard you'd had cardiac surgery. How are you feeling? Better than I have in years, actually, both physically and. I paused, studying her face. Time had been kind to Margaret Sullivan. The bright, curious girl I'd known at MIT had become a distinguished woman with laugh lines around intelligent eyes. And emotionally, I suppose. Emotionally? She raised an eyebrow as she reviewed my chart. That's an interesting way to describe post-surgical recovery. Let's just say recent events have clarified some things for me. About family, about what really matters. I found myself opening up to her in a way I hadn't with anyone in years. I've been living a lie for the past 8 years, Maggie, pretending to be someone I'm not. She set down my chart and leaned forward with the same focused attention I remembered from our study sessions decades ago. Tell me. So I did. I told her about Carter Properties, about the fortune I'd hidden, about Michael's cruelty and my decision to cut him out of my life completely. She listened without judgment, occasionally nodding with understanding. You tested him, she said when I finished, and he failed. Spectacularly. The word came out more bitter than I intended. I'm sorry, Sam. That must have been devastating. Her hand briefly touched mine, a gesture of comfort that sent an unexpected warmth through me. But maybe this is also an opportunity. An opportunity? To live authentically again. To stop hiding who you are. Her smile was gentle but knowing. I remember the Samuel Carter from MIT. Brilliant, ambitious, but also kind. You used to help struggling students with their calculus homework even though you were already 3 chapters ahead. You remember that? I remember everything about you, Sam. Including the fact that I had the biggest crush on you senior year. She laughed, a sound like silver bells. Of course, you were completely oblivious. I felt heat rise in my cheeks like a schoolboy. I was focused on graduating and starting my business. I thought someone like you was way out of my league. Someone like me? Smart, beautiful, destined for great things. Which clearly you achieved. I gestured at her white coat. Dr. Margaret Thompson. I'm impressed. Widowed Dr. Margaret Thompson, she corrected softly. My husband passed 8 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. Thank you. It's been lonely. She met my eyes directly. What about you? Ever marry? Briefly. In my 30s. Michael's mother. She died when he was 12. I found myself sharing details I rarely discussed. I threw myself into work after that. Built Carter Properties into what it became. But I realize now I may have neglected the most important thing. Which was? Actually connecting with people. Building relationships instead of just buildings. I paused, struck by a sudden thought. Maggie, would you have dinner with me? Not as my doctor, but as the woman who had a crush on me 47 years ago? Her smile could have powered the entire hospital. I thought you'd never ask. As we scheduled my next appointment, and her phone number found its way into my contacts, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. Not just for revenge against Michael, but for something positive, something real. Maybe losing my son meant finding myself again. 1 month after my dinner with Maggie, I sat in the mahogany-paneled conference room of Morrison & Associates, Chicago's most prestigious law firm. James sat to my right, a stack of legal documents before him. Across the table, 3 of the city's top attorneys waited for my instructions. Maggie squeezed my hand under the table. Over the past weeks, our relationship had blossomed into something beautiful and unexpected. She understood my pain about Michael, but more importantly, she supported my decision to move forward without him. Gentlemen, I began, my voice steady and clear. I want to establish the Carter Thompson Foundation. Every penny of my $1.8 billion fortune will be transferred to this charitable organization. The lead attorney, Harrison Mitchell, leaned forward. Mr. Carter, this is an enormous decision. Perhaps you should consider leaving some provision for your son. My son made his feelings about me abundantly clear, I interrupted. He called me pathetic, needy, and an embarrassment to the Carter name. He wished I would disappear from his life. I'm simply granting his request. James slid a folder across the table. The foundation will focus on affordable housing projects, homeless shelters, and educational programs for underprivileged children. Everything Samuel built, everything he worked for, will go to people who actually need it. And the press conference? Mitchell asked, making notes. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., I replied. I want every major news outlet in Chicago there. After 8 years of hiding, it's time the world knows who Samuel Carter really is. And more importantly, who he isn't leaving his fortune to. Maggie spoke for the first time. The medical community will be very interested in this story. A billionaire real estate mogul hiding in plain sight, then giving everything away after being rejected by his own son. That's exactly the narrative I want, I said. Michael values his reputation above everything else. Let's see how he handles being publicly identified as the son who was too ashamed of his billionaire father to pick him up from the hospital. Mitchell cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mr. Carter, this will destroy your son's career. The medical community doesn't look kindly on doctors who abandon family members. He destroyed our relationship first, I replied coldly. I'm simply making the consequences public. James pulled out another document. Sam, are you absolutely certain about this? Once you sign these papers, there's no going back. Michael will inherit nothing. I thought about the text messages, the years of shame and embarrassment, the golf game that was more important than his father's recovery. Then I looked at Maggie, who had shown me more genuine affection in 4 weeks than my son had in 8 years. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I signed document after document, each signature transferring millions of dollars away from Michael and toward people who would actually appreciate it. Homeless shelters, job training programs, scholarships for kids from broken homes. The press conference is set, James announced. Channel 7, Tribune, Sun-Times, and Forbes will all be there. This will be front-page news. Good, I said, standing up and helping Maggie with her coat. Michael wanted me to disappear from his life. Instead, I'm about to become the biggest news story in Chicago. And he'll have to watch as his pathetic father gives away a fortune he never knew existed. As we left the law firm, Maggie took my arm. Any regrets, Sam? Only one, I replied. That it took me 8 years to realize my son didn't deserve the man I was pretending to be, let alone the man I actually am. And tomorrow, Chicago learns the truth about Samuel Carter. And Michael learns what it really costs to be ashamed of your family. The die was cast. In less than 24 hours, my son's world would crumble, and he would finally understand exactly what he had thrown away. The grand ballroom at the Palmer House Hotel buzzed with anticipation. Reporters from every major Chicago news outlet filled the elegant space. Cameras focused on the podium where I would soon make the announcement that would change everything. I adjusted my tie, a silk Armani that cost more than most people's monthly salary. After 8 years of dressing like a humble retiree, wearing a billionaire's wardrobe felt both foreign and familiar. Maggie squeezed my hand. You look distinguished, Sam, like the titan of industry you've always been. Thank you for being here, I whispered. I couldn't do this without you. You could, she replied with a smile, but you don't have to. James approached the podium first. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Today, you'll meet a man who has remained hidden in plain sight for nearly a decade. The founder and former CEO of Carter Properties, worth $1.8 billion, Samuel Carter. A murmur rippled through the crowd as I stepped forward. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning. Good afternoon, I began, my voice carrying across the silent room. Many of you are wondering why a billionaire would live anonymously for 8 years. The answer is simple. I wanted to test whether my family would love me for who I am, not what I own. I paused, scanning the crowd. Near the back, partially hidden behind a pillar, stood Michael. His face was pale, his expensive suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw desperation, fear, and the dawning realization that his world was about to end. The test lasted 8 years, I continued. 8 years of driving a pickup truck, living in a modest home, and watching my son grow increasingly ashamed of his construction worker father. Yesterday, after recovering from heart surgery, my son sent me a text message. I pulled out my phone and read Michael's words aloud. Dad, seriously? I'm not your personal chauffeur. Take an Uber like everyone else. Some of us have real careers to worry about. Stop being so needy and pathetic. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Several reporters scribbled frantically. He also wrote, Don't embarrass me by showing up at the hospital looking like a homeless person. My colleagues already think less of me because of your background. My voice hardened. And finally, sometimes I wish you'd just stayed in that little Nebraska town and stopped bothering me. You're an embarrassment to the Carter name. Michael stepped forward, his face flushed with humiliation. Dad, please? The Carter name, I continued, ignoring his interruption, that my son finds so embarrassing, is worth $1.8 billion. Carter Properties owned over 300 buildings across the Midwest, including the Northwestern Memorial Hospital where Dr. Michael Carter works as a neurosurgeon. The reporters turned toward Michael like sharks sensing blood. Cameras flashed in his direction as he stood frozen, trapped in his own nightmare. Today I'm announcing the establishment of the Carter Thompson Foundation. I gestured toward Maggie, who joined me at the podium. Every penny of my fortune will fund homeless shelters, affordable housing projects, and educational programs for children from broken families. What about your son? A reporter called out. My son will inherit exactly what he thinks his father is worth. Nothing. The words rang with finality. He called me pathetic and needy. He wished I would disappear. He was ashamed of the man who sacrificed everything to give him the life he now lives. Michael pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down his face. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Please, I'll do anything. You had 8 years to love me without the money, I replied, my voice echoing through the silent ballroom. Instead, you spent 8 years wishing I would disappear. Congratulations, Michael. You got your wish. The pathetic, embarrassing father you were ashamed of just gave away $2 billion to people who will actually appreciate it. Security escorted the sobbing Michael from the room as reporters shouted questions. I watched him go with no emotion except relief. Ladies and gentlemen, I concluded, sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is showing them exactly who they really are. 6 months later, I stood before a crowd of 300 people in Grand Island, Nebraska, watching as Mayor Patricia Williams cut the ribbon on the first Carter Thompson housing community. 25 beautiful homes stretched across 10 acres, each one designed for families transitioning out of homelessness. Maggie stood beside me, radiant in a simple blue dress, her engagement ring catching the autumn sunlight. We'd married quietly 3 months ago, surrounded by the children from our foundation's first educational program. No fancy ceremony, no society photographers, just two people who'd found love when they least expected it. Samuel, would you like to say a few words? Mayor Williams asked. I stepped forward, looking out at the faces in the crowd. Former homeless veterans who would soon have keys to their own homes. Single mothers who'd been living in shelters. Children who would finally have stable addresses for school registration. 47 years ago, I bought my first property with borrowed money and big dreams I began. I thought success meant accumulating wealth, building an empire, leaving a legacy for my son. I paused, feeling Maggie's hand slip into mine. I was wrong. Real success isn't what you build for yourself. It's what you build for others. It's not about the family you're born into, but the family you choose and who chooses you back. In the crowd, I spotted Maria Santos, a single mother of 3 who'd been living in her car 6 months ago. She now held the keys to a 3-bedroom home with a garden where her children could play safely. Her tears of gratitude meant more than any business deal I'd ever closed. The Carter Thompson Foundation has committed to building 50 more communities like this across the Midwest, I continued. Not because we have to, but because everyone deserves a chance to build something meaningful with their lives. After the ceremony, Maggie and I walked through the empty streets of the new community. Tomorrow, families would move into these homes, but tonight, it was just us and the promise of new beginnings. Any regrets, Sam? Maggie asked, the same question she'd posed months ago. Only that it took me 69 years to understand what really matters. I stopped walking and turned to face her. Michael wanted a father he could be proud of in public. What he got was a father who was proud of him in private, even when he didn't deserve it. And now? Now I have a wife who loves me for exactly who I am. I have hundreds of families who will have homes because of choices I made. I have a purpose that goes beyond profit margins and property values. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart skipped, wondering if it might be Michael. But it was James, sending photos from the groundbreaking ceremony for our second housing community in Detroit. Still no word from him? Maggie asked gently. Number. And I don't expect there to be. I put my arm around her as we continued walking. Michael made his choice 8 years ago when he decided to be ashamed of me. I made mine 6 months ago when I decided to stop being ashamed of his choice. Do you think he's learned anything? I hope so. But that's not my responsibility anymore. I looked at the houses around us, each one representing a family that would have stability, safety, and hope. I spent decades trying to build something for a son who didn't want it. Now I'm building something for people who do. As we reached our car, Maggie smiled at me with the same warmth I'd fallen in love with decades ago at MIT. Ready to go home, Mr. Carter? With you? Always. We drove away from the Carter-Thompson housing community as the sun set behind us, leaving behind 25 new homes and the promise of many more to come. I'd lost a son who never truly valued me, but I'd found a wife who did, and a purpose that would outlast us both. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or property. Sometimes it's the example you set and the lives you change along the way.